Yesterday was locker cleanout day in Toronto. Players, coaches, and front office members all speaking with the media. We'll hear from some of those guys and react and break down some of the messaging that we heard throughout the Maple Leafs and their brass from the press conferences yesterday on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother from TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also now catch us up on video on YouTube as well. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We're on our road to 1,000. Once we get to 1,000 subs, we're giving away a Leafs jersey. So make sure that you're subbed up so that you qualify for the jersey giveaway. So it was locker cleanout yesterday, Dave, and we heard from the players. We heard from the coach. We heard from the GM. We also heard from the president of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So let's get into some of the stuff that we heard from today. Some of the stuff we liked, some of the stuff we didn't quite care much for. But before we do, I don't know about you, but round two of the playoffs starting up, and watching the Bolts go in and lay a beat down on the Panthers just made me realize again, it kind of brought it back. Like, the Leafs were so close. Oh, so close.
Yeah, I thought the Leafs had a bad power play. Panthers have gone, 21 straight power play opportunities without a goal?
I don't know how they actually got through the first round. 3 come from behind victories, and they went 0 for on the power play, and they somehow beat Washington in 6 games. It's crazy. But the second round of the playoffs, up and running. The Maple Leafs do not find themselves in the running after a 6th straight first-round exit for Toronto. 5 in a row being in a winner-go-home, do-or-die matchup, which was a American pro sports record of all the 7-game series pro sports, MLB, NBA, and the NHL, which is just asinine when you think about it. So we got a chance to hear from some of these guys. Why don't we play some of the clips that we heard today? So let's start with Brendan Shanahan, the president of hockey operations, kind of the head of the snake when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, Keefe and Dubas are more in the limelight, but Brendan Shanahan is really the go-to guy. He's the one who's got to sign off on everything, and he's somebody who has a lot of power when it comes to the Maple Leafs. And, he sat down and right away given a vote of confidence to both Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe. We weren't sure, right? The conversation was there. Are they going to come back? Will they not come back? Is Keefe going to be out? Are they going to potentially bring in Barry Trotz? Well, Brendan Shanahan lays it out in his opening remarks today with the media.
Everyone, obviously a very disappointing end to what was a great regular season and a great playoff series, which obviously didn't get the result we wanted. So extremely disappointed. We're not going to make any excuses. I thought our players battled hard. I thought that they played well, and they lost to a great hockey team. As players, management, and ownership, we share in everybody's frustration in not getting the job done. Certainly, as we look forward to next year, there's always going to be new faces. That being said, we will not be making changes just simply for the sake of saying that we made changes. With that, I think that, Kyle built a very good hockey team. I think he made excellent adjustments along the way. And I think Sheldon is an excellent coach. As we look forward to next year and getting to work toward next year, I think it's important to sort of state that that I see both of them as being extremely important in getting us to the next level, so that when we do approach next year and we do come back, that we are ready to take that next step. As Kyle had said to the players today, the work for next year begins right now. And I look forward to getting to work with Kyle and Sheldon for next season. Kyle.
So there you hear it, folks, right from the horse's mouth himself, the president of hockey operations for the Toronto Maple Leafs, coming out and pretty explicitly saying that Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas will indeed be back for another season. Why don't we talk about that decision before we kind of dive into some of the other stuff that was said here? Because I think that was a major talking point over the last couple of days. More so Sheldon Keefe, but there was some haters on Kyle Dubas and whether or not maybe they're a package deal or whatever. But retaining Kyle Dubas, bringing back Sheldon Keefe, the right move, considering that there's a guy like Peter DeBoer or Barry Trotz out there on the market. Was it the right decision for the Maple Leafs to retain both these guys going forward into next season? You're on mute there, pal, I think.
Let me get that mute off. I want to
There
make
you
sure
go.
that. All right. I think the decision to bring Kyle Dubas back makes sense. The Sheldon Keefe one, I guess, makes sense if they're trying to keep this core management group and coach together. Although I thought maybe Keefe, there might have been some thought about not keeping him around, because this is the second year in a row that the Leafs have been up in a series and have lost it. Like, not many coaches get those second, and now we're talking about a third opportunity
No. Yeah.
to come back. I thought that was a little surprising, but hearing how Shanahan talked about it, it's not surprising to hear it based on what Shanahan said. What do we like it? I think he's realized that they put together something that they thought was good enough to win, and ultimately in the end they came up short. That's how they're rolling with it. You don't have to like it, but that's just how they're going to justify it.
Yeah, a big kind of buzzword or phrase that was used today with a lot of the players and management was like, they're real close. They're right there. Well, we can kind of dive into those comments a little bit, but it's not wrong. Like they were, really close. Like they're one goal away or one bounce away in Game 6 from advancing into the next round of the playoffs. And look, I think it was the right move. Kyle Dubas, I always thought, he's done a really good job as a head coach. Brendan Shanahan talks about the adjustments that he made. You just look at this season right at the beginning of the year. Michael Bunting was a home run signing. David Camp was a home run signing. Andre Kasha was a great signing for this team. They made a mistake in Nick Ritchie. They quickly eradicated that by going out, making a move, didn't have to retain any money, and also got a serviceable Ilya Lyubushkin, who ended up playing on this team's top pair, and was just brought an element of nastiness to this club when they just didn't really have much of it, considering Muzzin was out for quite a long while. The only real big, I would say, big error that was made this offseason that they're going to have to try and figure out down the road is Peter Mrazek. But again, making those adjustments, going out, addressing the rest of the blue line, addressing, needs, going out and getting Giordano, also getting Colin Blackwell in that move. They made some in-season adjustments that did build a team that I felt that this team was good enough to compete for a Stanley Cup. I really, truly did. I felt if they could get past the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I thought were the second best team in the conference. I thought they had a chance to go all the way again, which is why I see the Bullets beat the Panthers 4-1. It's like, could have been Toronto, but I like the move. Sheldon Keefe I was kind of 50-50 on Keefe. I think he's a good coach. I like what he's been able to do. He has this team has grown under him for sure. He's still young. He still has things to learn. But at the end of the day, I think we're seeing growth from this team. They got to figure out a way to get it done, though. And I think that leash is probably pretty short. Like they've got till next season to get this done, and that's it. There's no more. We're this close. We're so close. So you can't really go at that anymore at that point. So when it comes to Sheldon Keefe, there were some good coaches out there. Maybe one other coach that I would have considered, and that's Barry Trotz. That would have been a consideration in my opinion. And Kyle Dubas came out and said that apparently he gave no consideration to that whatsoever. Keefe was always his guy. And I'm not surprised by that comment. I don't believe that for 1 second because, I mean, let's be honest, Kyle, if you really didn't put any thought into bringing in Barry Trotz, that means you're not doing your job because you got to at least have the conversation there because, well, for obvious reasons, I think. But at the end of the day, like Sheldon Keefe is Dubas' guy, right? They were with each other in the Sioux. Then when he got to the Marlies as the AGM, he brought Keefe along to the Marlies. And the second that he got to the NHL, the second he had the opportunity to can Mike Babcock, he brought Keefe. So like that's his guy. He believes that Sheldon is the coach to deliver the message. And as a trio, really, like they're all in quite synergy. Shanahan, Dubas, and Keefe. So it makes sense that they kind of are all riding and dying together with this team, with this vision, the Shannon plan, if you will. So I'm not surprised that they didn't make a move there. And I also don't think that it's the wrong decision because, in my opinion, the issues with this team isn't necessarily off the ice. I think that it's on the ice. So not making a change, like Shanny said, don't want to make a change for the sake of making a change. And I think that's what would have happened if you were to eliminate one of Kiefer Dubas from the fold because I don't think those were the issues. I really don't. Trotz might have been a bit of a guy who might be able to come in and be better than Sheldon Keefe, but it may not. Right? The message might not go through as well. The team might not mesh as well with Barry Trotz, or it could take a couple of years. And by that point, I mean, Austin Matthews' contract could be over and he could walk. You know what I mean? So ultimately, I think it's the right move to allow these guys to come back for another year and try and get this thing done. Now, the question is on the ice, like, are we going to see some other changes with the core? Why don't we take a quick break? When we get back into it, we got some more quotes from Shanahan. We got a couple of quotes here from Kyle Dubas as well, as they kind of dive into those on ice differences, what they liked, what they didn't like from this past season, and we can kind of also give our thoughts and opinions on what they're saying. So we'll do all of that when we return in just a moment. But first, let me tell you guys about one of today's show sponsors. And that's Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain store, auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? And why wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that the warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. I mean, why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? You got a Honda Odyssey fuel pump, costs you $353 from the chain store. At Rock Auto, just $216. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or your truck. Right, Locked On in their How'd You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts a car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano with you. Got Dave Morassutti alongside me. We are your hosts here at Locked On Leafs. And hey, just because the season's over, guys, just because the season's over doesn't mean that we're done delivering you content about the Maple Leafs each and every day, Monday through Friday. We're going to keep it going. It's a 365-day-a-year podcast. We still got episodes pumping through all the way till the end of the season and even throughout the offseason and into the summer as well. So don't you worry. Make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Leafs. If it's your first time joining us, thank you so much. Hopefully you are enjoying the content, and hit subscribe so that you can come back for some more each day. All right, let's continue our discussion here and continue hearing from the guys at today's locker cleanout session in Toronto at the Ford Performance Center. Why don't we hear let's play another Brendan Shanahan clip, actually. I want to hear the one about him and how the team is still looking for that killer instinct, because that was the kind of buzzword that came out of last year's locker cleanout day, the fact that they didn't have that killer instinct. Well, they were up 3-2 in game 6. with a chance to pounce and kill the Tampa Bay Lightning, chance to slay the king. They didn't do it. They were in game 7, down by 1 goal, chance to get there. They just couldn't do it. They couldn't put the team away. And ultimately, Kyle Shanahan asked, "Did you find that killer instinct?" And this is what he had to say.
One of the things that I liked about this year's process, despite the result, was that our team was on its toes. I liked their starts. I liked their comebacks. I liked the fight that they showed and the embracing of those moments. They just didn't get the job done. But the process, to me, what makes me feel more encouraged, doesn't take away my disappointment, but what makes me feel more encouraged was that it was a completely different approach. So we're still seeking that killer instinct, but we were doing a lot more of the things that you need to do in order to get that job done than I've seen in the past couple of elimination games where I felt we looked a little bit on our heels.
All right, so Dave, why don't you comment on that one there?
It's easy. Like, was it different this year? Potentially, yeah. There were things that were different, but the result was the same. Like, we can say that they looked better in this game 7. They were in it. They were engaged, but the result was the same. They only scored 1 goal. They had their chances. They had their power play chances. They had opportunities to get into that game, and they couldn't get it done. Like, it's when they had a chance to come back to Toronto 3-1 in game 4. We didn't hear Shanahan talk about how they absolutely looked gutless in that game where they just didn't even show up, right? Jack Hamill got a mercy pull because of how bad they were.
Right.
And instead, the Lightning tie that up, go 2-2. Yes, the Leafs ended up winning game 5, but imagine if they had won game 4. And the just to know that you can end that series in 5 games. Like, that's the killer instinct. That's what everyone's been talking about, the killer instinct. And I don't think maybe Brandon Shanahan realizes, in a way, it's not just killer instinct in the game, it's the killer instinct in the series, that when you have a chance to really put yourself ahead. Like, you think about I'll bring in another team, the Colorado Avalanche playing the Nashville Predators. I understand that Colorado playing Nashville, very different than the Leafs playing the Tampa Bay Lightning. But guess what? There was no doubt the Colorado Avalanche were going to win that series in 4. They had to win one of those games in overtime, yeah, but they were dominant in every other game. There was no
Absolutely.
doubt. They
I
got the job done. That's where I think it comes down to that. Yes, it's the Tampa Bay Lightning, but if you get that chance to finish them in 5, you have to do it. You have to at least put yourself in the best position to. And that game 4 showed that the Leafs were not ready for that moment.
Yeah, a game that I heard a couple of the players reference to was game 2. They felt that game 2 they weren't really equipped to play that game either. So when Brandon Shanahan said I was encouraged by their starts, kind of laughed because terrible start in game 2. The game 4 was awful, and then games 4, 5, 6, and 7 they gave up the first goal of the game. What
Yeah.
starts are you talking about here? Outside of game 1, I don't know if they necessarily, had a great start. Did they have bad starts in a couple of
Game
those
game
games?
3, they
No.
were pretty good. Game
Game
3,
7 game 3, they were decent, right? And then, game 7, was it a bad start? No, I thought that it was a decent start, but, I just found it comical. It's like, "I like the starts." Did you? Because 2, maybe 3 out of the starts were kind of brutal for, for your team there. Um One other thing there was another clip that actually let's play this one here because when he's talking about what he was encouraged by, somebody also kind of asked him like, "Hey, well, what?" There were so many people this year that checked out through the regular season, right? They said like the regular season doesn't matter. Wake me up when the playoffs hits, and obviously the team hit to sell tickets, which is very easy to do in Toronto, anyways. But to keep that fan engagement, like you got to sell, like, hey, the regular season does matter because look at what we were able to do. Before I play Brandon Shanahan and what he had to say about, why the regular season may matter and whatnot. Do you think that after what we witnessed this season, having the greatest regular season in Maple Leafs history, multiple career highs for so many players, many, many, many franchise highs, goal scoring records, points records, all that stuff, and they still weren't able to get it done. Whatever they do next season in the regular, does it matter to you?
I felt the same way this season. Whatever they did this season really didn't mean. I mean, look, Auston Matthews scoring 60 goals, that's a great accomplishment.
Hmm.
Happy for him for that. But yeah, this regular season, you're like, oh, we should be celebrating that they had their best regular season to date. And I'm just like, at this point in the NHL, regular season really means nothing anymore because we have seen how many teams when great do so well in the regular season and then flame on the playoffs. The best reminder for me of that was when the Vancouver Canucks won the President's Trophy and were bounced by the LA Kings
Four. Yeah.
in four.
Yeah.
The Tampa Bay Lightning
Yeah.
were a great team until the Columbus Blue Jackets were just like, nay, nay, bye bye. Like,
Right.
that regular season is irrelevant. The NHL has proven that the regular season is irrelevant because of what happens in the playoffs. And in the NBA, it's becoming very much like the NBA in that regard.
So I have a counterpoint to play devil's advocate on you for that.
Mhm.
But I want to play Brendan Shanahan's comments, which I kind of echo to an extent, and I'll explain why I mean that afterwards. So here's Brendan Shanahan on why, the regular season matters and why next season will matter.
The regular season is important. There are certain things and skills that we have to do in order to prepare ourselves for those moments when we get in the playoffs. And that'll be the same next year. The regular season is incredibly important to hone those skills and to sharpen those skills so that when we get in those moments, we're just that much better. We are, those small increments better that are needed in order to be on top and advancing.
So I agree to an extent, right? I agree where the regular season is a chance for you to fine tune kind of what you want to do in the playoffs. And I felt that for a majority of this past year, they actually did a pretty good job in changing my mind in thinking that this year could be different because they did a lot more of playoff like play throughout the regular season. You look at the way that goals are scored in the playoffs, a lot of them are scored right out in front of the net in the inner slot, right? Rebound, greasy goals. That's how you score in the playoffs. They were doing that in the regular season. They were going hard to the net. Guys like Mitch Marner pouncing on rebounds and putting them in the back of the net. You had guys like Michael Bunting who are standing out in front, waiting on the doorstep for a tip or something like that. Meanwhile, you fast forward to the playoffs, and that kind of went away. It was very much perimeter play, and they ended up having their average goal scored was from 29 feet from the crease, which was the second furthest in the NHL for goals scored on average in the playoffs this year. Only one team scored on average further than the Toronto Maple Leafs. So they did not go to the gritty areas where they need to score, which they did in the regular season.
Yep.
They fine-tuned it, and then they just didn't do it in the playoffs. And here's the better example I want to use. The power play. We came into this series talking about how the power play and special teams were going to be a massive, a big time factor for the Maple Leafs. They went 0 for 18 in their final 18 opportunities against the Tampa Bay Lightning. When you lose game 6 and game 7 by 1 goal, and then you look at that statistic and went 0 for 18 in their last 18 opportunities, all you need was 1 goal in those games, man. 1 power play goal in each of those games. The opportunities got cut down in those ones. The whistles kind of went away a little bit, but you had to convert right at some point.
Yeah.
They were the number 1 power play in the regular season, Dave. How do you go from being number 1, operating at near 30%, to in a 7-game playoffs going 4 for 28 at 14% rate? 14%.
Disgusting.
Literally half what it was throughout the regular season. So, what are you talking about? Fine tuning all of these details so that you're ready to go in the playoffs. You did that. You showed me that you can score in the gritty areas and go to the net and get greasy rebound goals. You showed me that you can have successful, special teams. You were top 10 in penalty kill, top power play unit. And then the playoffs roll around and they were both no-shows. The depth, guys like Mikheyev and Engvall, who we thought maybe were going to be a factor here because they had great, seasons, regular seasons. Mikheyev was on 82 game pace, a 30 goal scorer this year on an 82 game pace. Didn't score a single goal that had a goaltender in the crease. Scored 2 all series. They were both into empty netters. Pierre Engvall, 0 goals in this playoff series. You didn't get the depth scoring that we thought was there because we saw it in the regular season. So the regular season, yeah, I guess if you do apply what you learned in the playoffs and you fine tune those things, but when they don't show up, I don't want to hear that, man. I don't want to hear that at all. I don't blame fans if they kind of check out again and say, "Let me know what happens when we get here May of 2023 after what we kind of just witnessed."
And to be frank, some fans are going to be like, I don't ever really care about the first couple games of the playoffs until the Leafs have a chance to put the series away. Like they're
Maybe.
like I did have a lot of people who felt like the regular season was going to mean nothing to them because of what happened in the playoffs,
Yeah.
right? And it's going to feel like that again. I guarantee it's going to feel like that again next year. I mean, look, I will say this. The games like, what they had against Buffalo, who are other teams, like Arizona, like those
Montreal.
Montreal, those games there, look at how the Leafs play in those games.
Yeah.
That's what is going to tell me about this team and the adjustments they're going to make. Because it's one thing to lose against those teams. It's another thing to lose and look pretty bad against those teams.
I mean, if they win those games against the teams that they lost to, that they should have, I mean, I would have to go and look at, which I guess I suppose I could look at it quickly right now. There was a chance that they could have ended up finishing first in this division if they would have went and won the games that they were supposed to against those sub 500 teams. Like,
Would have
if
been
I'm not
really close
mistaken,
for
were
sure.
they not? They were sub 500 against sub 500 teams. Like
Well,
that.
I can
That
count 3 losses to the Sabres.
they went
off
0
top of my
2
head.
against the Yotes.
They lost at least 2 to Montreal.
So there you go. So they finished 7 points out from Florida. So even if you win 4 out of those ones that you lose, right? If you would have split with or maybe you take 2 off of Buffalo, you sweep Arizona, which you definitely should have, and then you go ahead and you get one more game against the Montreal Canadiens, which is one more.
Pretty
You win the division and you're playing the Washington Capitals instead of the Tampa Bay Lightning. So yeah, that also definitely matters going into next season. We'll have tons of time to kind of get into that,
Yeah.
going forward. But it just when he spoke about how the regular season matters to fine tune for when the playoff comes around, it only matters if you actually execute the way that it's intended to, right? Which again isn't Shanahan's fault. It's not necessarily Kyle Dubas's fault. I wouldn't even say it's really Sheldon Keefe's fault. It's on the players to execute. You can lead a horse to water, can't force him to drink. As the old adage goes. You know what I mean? Why don't we take one more quick break here, Dave? And then when we get back, let's hear from Kyle Dubas and his thoughts on whether or not we could see some changes to the core, which was really the interesting part about what I wanted to glean from today. How did they feel about potentially making things uncomfortable for this core group here? We'll get into that in a moment. But first, Dave, I want to tell the good folks about our friends over at Built Bar.
We're going to talk about execution and lack of execution. That does not apply to our good friends over at Built Bar because they found a way to turn a Puffs bar into a birthday cake treat. Folks, imagine dipping your finger into that plastic tub of birthday cake frosting, then opening your eyes and realizing that it was only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. that it is what it's like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built. I just received birthday cake puffs. I have never had anything like this before. I wish I had one to show you, but I ate it. That's how good it was. They're available right now, and we can't promise they will be there tomorrow. So go get them today at built.com. And if you haven't tried the puffs, I'll let you in on a little secret because that's what friends do. We're all friends here at the Locked On Leafs podcast. A chocolate covered marshmallow protein bar. Yep, you heard me. Delicious flavored marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. Make every day your birthday with Built's birthday cake puffs, which has taken the delicious experience of biting into a fresh slice of birthday cake and robbed in 100% white chocolate. And of course, you got to have those sprinkles. So, how can you take advantage of this offer? Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. So, that is the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off at built.com.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with me. We are your hosts here at Locked On Leafs. It was locker cleanout day in Toronto. We heard from Brendan Shanahan already and his thoughts on how the season went and his thoughts on what's going on going forward. Brendan Shanahan did come out and say today, Kyle Dubas, he'll be back. Sheldon Keefe, he'll be back. What about the core players, though, Dave? What about the core? And that's kind of been the big question that has been surrounding Leafs Nation over the past 48 to 72 hours. You know, what do they do with this roster? Do they run it back completely with the same core? Obviously, there's going to be some fringe changes, but in terms of the spine of the team, is it going to look the exact same, or is this the year they finally do something to change it up and maybe make things a little uncomfortable and give this roster, give this team, this locker room a bit of a jolt? And I was hoping coming into today, I think we spoke about this on yesterday's podcast. You can go and check it out if you missed it. But one of the things that I wanted to hear, or one of the things I didn't want to hear rather, from Kyle Dubas was how he was married to the core and how he believes that this team can win and they'll run it back and they'll try and get it done with this core. I wanted to hear that he was open to making changes. If he felt like the right move came along, he'd be open to doing it. Where in the past, it just didn't seem like it. It seemed like at the end of last year's presser, it was like, okay, the core four are back. I could guarantee I would put my mortgage payments for the next 3 years on that team being back. After hearing what Kyle Dubas had to say today, I'm not certain that I'd be putting any rent payments on that one. Not to say that a change will happen, but I think that it's more of a conversation now, which is exactly what I kind of hoped and wanted to hear. So why don't we play that audio now for you? It's Kyle Dubas on whether or not on I guess his thoughts on what might be happening with the core going forward.
It's my job at the end of every year to evaluate whether we can improve the team. And if there's a way to improve the team, which involves someone who me or you or anyone would constitute as the core, it's my job to investigate that and determine whether it will make us a better team in the short run, long run, and then whether we want to do that. So that's the way that we'll handle the offseason. I've felt in previous gatherings like this that I needed to be more adamant because of the way that things had gone or different circumstances around some of the players at those times. But the way that I'll approach it is we'll sit down as a management group, look at our whole entire roster, look at who's available, what can we bring in, and our whole goal is going to be to make the team better.
I found that very interesting, the way he phrased, where he says, it was the part where he said, with the way that things had gone with certain players
in the past,
in
right?
the past.
Yeah.
That was very, very telling. I felt.
What did it tell you, Dave? Please explore.
I think Kyle Dubas went to bat for a lot of players. Kyle Dubas has gone and he has defended a lot of these players, and some of these players did not reward Kyle Dubas for the words he said. And I think Kyle Dubas has realized that, so you can't just, at some point you have to be open to doing things, because This group is not going to stay together forever, right? This what the Leafs have right now isn't going to last forever. So you have to do what you can to give its best chance to find some success. And ultimately, when you go to bat for players and it doesn't work out, how many times can you expect your boss to defend you? Not many bosses have defended. I've seen defend their employees like Kyle Dubas has. I will say that.
Yeah, he's passionate about the group that he's got there, and he's said so many times, "We can and we will. I believe in this group. I believe in the vision. I'll go down with the ship." Like he's had all of those, quotes in the past, and that was the closest I think I've heard him to potentially veering from what the original plan was. And not to say that he's going to make a move. And as Shanahan alluded to in his opening remarks, you're not going to make a change just for the sake of making a change. It has to make sense. It's got to make the team better and put them in a better position to win, right? We're not saying you got to move on from Tavares like that. It just basically use it as a cap dump. We got to move on from Nylander, just trade him for a bunch of pieces because we just need to fill out the roster another way. Like, no, it's got to make sense at the end of the day. I think we all understand that. Whether or not I have a name right now that would make a whole lot of sense, I can't give it to you over the next, couple of weeks, months, the entire offseason we'll have to decide which players we think could come in and help the squad. But ultimately, you're telling me that there's nobody who, you could potentially find as a suitor, a trade partner that could be an even hockey deal to move on from a Willie Nylander or potentially a John Tavares or someone like that, where it could equally or potentially help your team and make you better. I think it's worth exploring. If the calls are coming, you got to take them. You can't just flush it right away. And to me, that's what Kyle kind of signaled here was I think we got to be open to it. We got to listen. We got to hear. Everything's going to be on the table. We're going to evaluate the entire roster and see what we can do. And at one point, Sheldon Keefe, he did come out and also say that the belief in the group is as strong as it's ever been. That was a pretty strong quote. It's as strong as it's ever been. I don't know why it would be. Oh, I guess I do know why. They took the Cup champs to Game 7. I suppose you could say that. But at the end of the day, they didn't get it done. But it's as strong as it's ever been. But he also made a comment saying, whatever the final roster ends up looking like, which didn't seem definite that, this roster, the core, the spine will look exactly the same, which, again, don't know if it will happen, but it's certainly something that's got to be entertained over the next couple of weeks, couple of months before training camp.
Elliot Friedman made it a point in saying that he believes the Leafs are going to look for more tenacity in that top six. And I'm looking at the top six as is currently formed. And I guess we're going to include Nylander in that. So you'd have Marner, Matthews, Bunting, Tavares, Nylander, and I guess you probably put Kerfoot or probably. There's two players I can easily see as like Kerfoot doesn't bring tenacity. Not really. William Nylander, we know for a fact, does not really bring tenacity. Tavares.
Here's the thing about Willie though. Like tenacity depends on what your definition of tenacity is, I suppose. But like he's a guy that at times this year I've seen drop a shoulder and drive to the net. We've seen that happen, and when that does happen, typically good things come for the Maple Leafs. But he doesn't do it on a daily basis. He doesn't do it on a nightly basis. He makes business decisions based on where he's at and how he's feeling. And that could be a bit of an issue for this team.
Yeah, no, definitely. And this is where I think that's the consistency you need to find has to come in your top six. Your top six needs to be your most consistent unit from the beginning of the season to the end. The top line definitely brought it. Second line did not.
No.
So if we're looking and saying that the Leafs need to make a change in their top six, we know exactly where that change needs to happen. The question is, how much is Kyle Dubas willing to make? Like, at what point will he really? What line is he going to draw? Right?
We go ahead.
No, I that's my question. There, it's like, what line will he draw? That's going to be my biggest thing to watch out for.
we can delve into both of these names and these conversations so much more in the future. But the two names that I consistently am hearing right now, and I don't know if these are even possible trade ideas, but everyone's just kind of putting their armchair GM hat on. And I just want a yes or no answer from you, Dave, from both of these. And maybe throughout the next week or so, we can dive into them a little bit stronger. William Nylander, armchair GM trade. Would you trade him straight up for JT Miller?
Oh, I would. I know that Nylander has more term on his contract, but JT Miller is a guy that I think the Leafs could use. So if you're looking for a straight up trade, that would I don't know if Vancouver would go for that. At least they get a player for longer than they'll get something out of Nylander that he's there a little bit longer.
Was an 80 point guy. He's a point per game player.
Yeah,
So is JT Miller. But,
is JT Miller, and JT Miller can play center.
yep. Give you that
Which
versatility.
Yeah. So if that's a trade that can happen, that's a trade I would consider making. I just think that
Remember when I brought that up in like January or February, and like Leafs Nation thought that I had lost my nut?
yeah,
Like they thought that I lost my mind bringing that trade up, and here we are months later, and it's a massive talking point amongst Leafs Nation and armchair, GM topics. It's kind of funny. Here's the other name for you, Tom Wilson. Would you trade Willie Nylander straight up for Tom Wilson?
ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, Tom Wilson would bring that tenacity.
Got some
I'd
scoring
have
touch.
yeah, he's not here's the thing, he's not Wayne Simmons in that regard. Like he can bring scoring. I would entertain. I'd have to see what the full scope. I don't know what Tom Wilson's contract situation is like and all those things. I have to look into that, but I wouldn't.
Maybe 5.5,
I
couple
wouldn't.
of years, but yeah.
I wouldn't be like, no way, no freaking way. Like I wouldn't shoot it down right away. I would look into what that possibility would look like for Leafs because he's another guy that I think really too. If you're looking for a criteria of a player to trade William Nylander for or any player on the Leafs to trade for, tenacity and a shooter. The Leafs lack that other shooter on the power play. I want them to find like that other guy that they can counteract with Matthews because if Marner's the second best option to shoot on the power play going into next season, that's gonna be a problem.
Like for if you're replacing Willie, you mean,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like Nylander
Yeah.
can shoot, but they never made him that option on the power play.
Well, plus if you're using Nylander as a trade chip and you're moving him out, you got to replace
Exactly.
that guy in the power play. So yeah, you make some sense there. Which interestingly enough, I mean, Kyle Dubas was talking about it today, how they may have to get creative to try and make things work cap wise, and they're going to have to try and find those diamond in the roughs, those Michael Buntings, the David Camps, the Kasha type of deals that they got this past offseason. But he also acknowledged that the guys on the Marlies, some people are going to have to step up. Nick Robertson's a guy who's going to be given an opportunity. You talked about somebody who does have a pretty lethal shot. Potentially, he's an option who could kind of fill in at some point there. He might be able to do it, and he's coming off of a pretty good year in the Marlies to end this season. There were some other names that he mentioned too who potentially could fill out the bottom end of this roster. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what this team decides to do here, pal. But that's the kind of 82 and a half now because the cap's going up a year, a million. $82.5 million question would be, is this core going to stay together? Is every single one of these core 5, 6, 7 guys, however you want to say, are they going to return? Jack Campbell's a big question mark. Jack Campbell of late seems less likely to return than I initially thought. Maybe we can get into that tomorrow. And it's a little tease, but something smells with the Jack Campbell thing. Let me tell you, something smells a little fishy, and I think I got to get off my chest tomorrow. So let's end today's pod here. So it's a little tease. So you're going to have to sub up. Make sure you come back for tomorrow's show if you want to hear what I got to say and some of the rumblings that I'm hearing about Jack Campbell and his potential future with the Maple Leafs. But overall, Dave, I think let me ask you this question before we leave. I suppose one final one. Give me something that you liked that you heard today, and give me something that you didn't quite like that you heard today.
I liked what Mark Giordano had to say about saying he really liked his time here, and it's no secret that he liked his time here. So I think there's already talks, or still the conversation has already started to brew there.
Mm-hmm.
I liked what Jason Spezza said about the team's performance, and I think this guy has a real, true feel of what this team is lacking and needs. But I did not like the doom and gloom. I don't know what the future holds for Jason Spezza, because look, I get his age. I get he's not the same player he was even when he first came here. But Jason Spezza still provides value, and if the Leafs front office doesn't see that, there I think lies a problem that I think we should talk about a little bit more.
Yeah. In the next couple of days, we'll pull in some audio from the players and kind of dive a little bit deeper into what some of those guys had to say. As expected, Marner did not speak um, after the incident that occurred the night before with the carjacking. So that wasn't a surprise. I don't know if he's going to speak at some point, maybe not. But that's just so there won't be any Marner audio to hear from. One thing that I liked, I guess, just to kind of bring it back to the Shanny, Keefe, and Dubas comments that we heard today that we kind of spoke about, just the fact that they're open to changing the core. They're not completely married to this vision. These guys, if something pops up where they feel they can make a change for the better, it sounds like they're more open to it in the past. What I didn't like, a lot of talk about how they're so close. They're right there. Well, right where? One game away from what? The second round? Like a lot of the discussions about how close they are, they're right there, knocking on the doorstep. They're knocking on the doorstep to the second round, Dave. Not the conference final, not the Stanley Cup final. It's not game 7 or game 6 of the Stanley Cup or game 7 of the conference. They're talking about first round, knocking on the door right there, right where, guys? Right where? That's what I also find hilarious about all this conversation, and that was kind of like last year's buzzword was killer instinct. This year's buzzword was like we're so close, right there. We're right there. Where?
Where,
where? Where?
as the Italians would say, dove,
You're
not
close to the
dove.
second round. You're so close to get into the second round.
As my nonna says to me half the time because she can't hear me because she's half deaf. Ma che su dici?
Mm-hmm.
As the Italians, I'll leave
Exactly.
with that Italian wisdom. If anybody from our YouTube podcast audience wants to learn a little Italian from me, when somebody says something you have no idea what the heck they're talking about, just go che su dici.
There's another phrase that I use that probably shouldn't say because we try to be as PG as possible on the pod.
Yeah.
But there's another Italian phrase which I'm sure and some of the listeners know what it is. That I'm gonna leave it because I think we do have some U18s listening in on this pod that may not their parents might not like if I were to use that language. All right, that is going to do it for us here today, Dave. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. And make sure, please, to subscribe to Locked On Leafs on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. And also leave us a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts on what you heard throughout the press conferences today from Kyle Shanahan, Keefe, and Dubas. Do you like the fact that they're bringing him back? Did you want to see a change? Just give us your overall thoughts on what you gleaned from some of the clips that we played, or if you listen to the fulls, which you can go on to Maple Leafs YouTube and listen to the entire hour-long press conference between those guys. You can certainly do that. But yeah, go ahead and leave a comment. Smash that like button for all them YouTubers out there. I hate when I have to say that. I really do hate that phrase. Smash that like button, but do it. All right, we'll be back with another episode tomorrow, guys. We'll get into the whole fishy, soupy Campbell situation and also maybe hear from guys like Jason Spezza, Mark Giordano, Austin Matthews, to name a couple that spoke at Locker Cleanout. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked